All right. Oh, good Lord. What a time. What a fun time. Um, I guess we'll get Craigbot in here and we'll get things moving
Now recording.
as we continue the DGQC reading of Spinoza Practical Philosophy. Making our way through the dictionary portion of our reading, which I love being able to say the dictionary portion. It's not really the dictionary portion. It's a glossary. Deleuze adding in his sort of take on these things with sources, which is nice. We've been taking our time with it though, because there's a lot that's being said here before we move on to the rest of this. And of course, this is sort of a thing Deleuze's want to do, taking some of the major concepts created by these thinkers and explaining them. So we are at page 48. Let me share my PDF. And how we're going to go through this is the same as we've been trying to go through kind of any of this. Goal is going to be fairly simple. We read. I'm probably not going to read like 2-sentence paragraphs. I'm probably going to get through a little bit of a chunk. We'll discuss, make sure everyone grasps, and then we'll kind of move on from there. Is that everyone good with that as a thing?
Yep.
Thoughts, opinions, anyone? Excellent. Then we will.
Yeah. Okay.
No, go for it, Derek. What you got?
Nothing. I'm just agreeing.
Excellent. I like agreement. That's going to help me. All right. Well, then I guess I'll just get to reading away. Affections and affects. 1. The affections, affectio, are the modes themselves. The modes are the affections of substance or of its attributes. These affections are necessarily active, since they are explained by the nature of God as adequate cause, and God cannot be acted upon. I mean, do I just stop here and we just take a second? Because it's kind of a dense thing to say and very little to sort of work with. What do you got? What do you think, Derek?
Yeah. Can you hear me? So,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Right. So I think we should read the whole paragraph, because I think if you notice the number each. Oh yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. They are mini paragraphs, aren't they? But I think what they are.
There are 3 points that sort of build.
Yeah. I think Deleuze calls them level. They said first level, second level, third level. And they are connected to each other. And the other thing to note is that this paragraph goes from affections to effects. So the first one is to do with effects, but the third level is to do with effects. Sorry, first level is to do with affections, and the third level is to do with effects.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it sort of takes that's the way it's structured. It takes us from the first to the third level.
Yeah, and he's taking us through Spinoza. I mean, like as a thing, because this is like tiny version of ethics. Ethics 1, nature of God. Ethics 2, nature of mind. Ethics 3, I believe, is the affections. So he's taking us sort of a really top line through those, and then he's going to spend the rest of the definition really sort of building into that. One of the things to note, and it was a footnote we saw earlier, is Deleuze takes pretty significant umbrage with translators who translate affect as emotions, because it's affectinus, affectus and affectinus is the original Latin, and it gets translated as emotion often in English. So do check your version of the ethics and check the third book and see if it's a Deleuze approved copy. Really, it's only Penguin. I think Penguin's the only copy he approves of in English at this point. So I went long, deep story. So how about this? Let me read through 1, 2, and 3. Then we'll go back through and break it down and rediscuss. That'll be kind of nice. At a second level, the affections designate that which happens to the mode, the modifications of the mode, the effects of other modes on it. These affections are therefore images, or corporeal traces, first of all, and their ideas involve both the nature of the affected body and that of the affecting external body. Quote, the affections of the human body, whose ideas present external bodies as present in us, we shall call images of things. When the mind regards bodies in this way, we shall say that it imagines. It's a Spinoza quote. 3. But these image affections or ideas form a certain state, constitutio, of the affected body and mind, which implies more or less perfection than the preceding state. Therefore, from one state to another, from one image or idea to another, there are transitions, passages that are experienced, durations through which we pass to a greater or lesser perfection. Furthermore, these affections, images, or ideas are not separable from the duration that attaches them to the preceding state and makes them tend toward the next state. These continual durations or variations of perfection are called affects or feelings. I mean, he's outlining sort of, he's outlining, again, like I said, the three sort of parts of ethics, and he's doing a really sort of grand version of it. The ethics opens with God and the nature of God. Like, what is God? How does it work? How does God work? What is God? Blah, blah, blah. And the first time affections are mentioned is sort of as the substance, which is God or more or less. And then the attributes of that substance. This is where he opens and is basically like, oh, these affections are elements of the like modes themselves. The modes are the affections of substance or of its attributes. These affections are necessarily active. They're not like the passive state of things. This really, I don't know about anyone else, but this feels like it's taking me back to logic a sense. Like there's a lot happening here that I can sort of read through that. Since they're explained by the nature of God as adequate cause and God cannot be acted upon. That's that one I will need someone else to help me break down because that's just such a fucking extreme sentence.
Oh, when you read the
Yeah,
ethics,
I think what's happening in this let's call it the three levels,
Mm-hmm.
as you know, the one paragraph. And I think what's been set out is the relationship between affections and effects. So how we go from affections, which is level 1, through to the third level, which is one of effects. And so it starts with level 1 is to do with affections, and the affectio. And he said these are the modes themselves. And what we need to understand is more, what does he mean by a mode? And the mode is the way we are. We are modes. The modes, and he says the modes are the affections of substance. So the modes are substance. So again, this kind of fundamental definition of what we are is substance, or what things are, I should say, not just things are, is substance, or its attributes. So the modes are the affections of substance or attributes, and that's where it's a kind of, and I think what we get in each of these levels, we get a kind of development of it's developed further. You give them more, it's developed further and further. So it goes from this initial understanding of affection to the third level, where the effects appear. So the affections are the kind of how we are, but how we are with others. So the affections are one body, how one body kind of affects, is the affection of one body to another. So this, as we've already seen, this notion of composition, decomposition, those kind of relations. And the third level is the appearance of the effects, so the feelings, which are kind of hidden. I think the other thing that Spinoza or Deleuze says through Spinoza, or Spinoza said through Deleuze, I should say, is that we know the effect, but we don't know the cause. And these are the feelings, these effects, the sadness and the joy and sadness are kind of the passions, So I think that first one, it's a kind of relatively, it's a straightforward definition, I would say. So the affections, so he starts with saying what the affections are. They're the modes. What are the like? He doesn't say what the modes are, obviously, because not obviously, but it's clear. He doesn't say what they are. But the modes are ourselves. The way in which we interact with each other, or something interacts with us. There is this kind of mode.
It's almost the way of being good or bad. It's how he referred to this, the distinction of good or bad, and how sort of the way we are.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The affections are compared to ideas and also compared to feeling, right? Are they the same thing?
As
Right. So, well, I think then the ideas appear, I think, in the second level, at the second. So the first level just talks about affections. They're the modes themselves. Modes are the affections of substance. Remember, substance is that fundamental kind of thing. The kind of what, or another way of saying substance probably is being. What we are. As substance, the kind of the essence is another term, another way substance is expressed. But the modes are the affections of substance. So one substance interacting with another, so I would say at this point, or its attributes. And he said that they're necessary active, since he explained by the nature of God as adequate cause. And I think that's, for me, is kind of not clear. But I think one of the things he says about God is that God is infinite. So the nature of God as adequate cause. But sorry, the idea of ideas is the second level. So at the second level, the affections designate that which happens to the mode, the modifications of the mode. So this is now the modes kind of in their modification. So one mode in relation with the other, the effects of other modes on it. So this is the kind of effect. So the first one we had cause, and this one we have effect. And he said these are therefore images or corporeal traces, first of all, and they're ideas. So this is where the ideas are kind of generated in this kind of this modification of one mode to another, the effects of modes of modes interacting, shall we say. So this gives rise to ideas. And it makes the ideas involve the nature of the affected body and that of the affecting external body. So the effect, and I quote, the affections of the human body whose ideas present external bodies, as present we shall call images of things. And these are ideas are images of things. I mean, that's where the word idea comes from, eidos. And when the mind regards bodies in this way, she'll say that imagines. So we've got this kind of notion of imagination that it gives us a kind of an imaginary understanding of how one body interacts with ourselves, or how the different the modes interact, and the modification. So it's an idea which is not, I would say, a kind of true understanding. It's an idea. It's a kind of an image, and it's imaginary. And that we had this in the previous entry on abstractions when he talks about the notion of abstraction. Imagination.
So the affections are the modes, and the ideas are the images. Is what the human body, whose ideas present external bodies as present in us. In other words, that becomes the kind of the mind imagining, imagining, and so it is kind of like breaking the affections into two parts. One is the body, one is the mind. Um, the mind is what brings about the ideas, right? Ideas are images that the mind does, but it does it by making, presenting external bodies as present in us. So, so really, it's really they're all, the mind and body are both affections. It's like, let's say they're one mode, but then it's split into two, separated. That separation comes about because of the ideas of them uh, that are, presented as external bodies. So that's where the separation begins, the kind of dualism between the mind and body. But it is ultimately just one mode, or, one mode with two, parts of that. One is body and one is mind. One presents ideas as images. So, but the feelings are still there, right? But the feeling is is both mind and body, right? There's no separation. So the feelings are, are experiences that we have, but there's no separation between what is mind and body in
Well,
terms of
and
feeling, right?
I'm hesitant because the way I'm very hesitant anytime that there's like the separation of mind body in any way other than as Deleuze calls it here, or Spinoza talks about it, the parallelism of mind and body. That there is separation, but it's when we're talking here, I think it's and when we're talking bodies, like bodies of things, the substance of stuff, it's the thing, almost the thing in and of itself, as Deleuze writes elsewhere. Um, the being in itself, which is the substance, and being within something else, and this is the mode. The mode is the thing in something else and is conceived through something else. It's the sort of secondary part of the thing, the secondary path of it.
Right.
Um,
Right. There's no real separation. It's just that the mind is playing this kind of game of it is kind of externalizing the body as if it was separate from the mind, but it is all really one body, mind and body, right?
yeah, it's yes, it's more complicated than I think just saying it's the separation of mind and body where we have the ideas of the things versus like it's I think more complex than that, or at least
Oh
different.
yeah,
I should say
because
different.
he's arguing against the Cartesian dualism. That's his main
Hmm.
thing, that there is no separation. There's just one substance, but that one substance creates both the mode of the mind and the mode of the body as if they were separate, but they're really not.
Hmm.
But that's how the mind comes about, with ideas and images, that it imagines that it is somehow there's an external body, right? And I think that's number two, right, where he says that the mind, the human body whose ideas present external bodies as present in us, we call images of things, right?
Well, so and it's granted it's been a bit since I've done like a real reading of the ethics, and I'm not even sure I've ever done one after the last few readings of this again. But like um, the levels as Deleuze is talking about here, um, and the way that Spinoza, in my reading, is sort of talking about it. It isn't so much that we ever really have like we don't really exist at like level one. Like this is not the thing. Like as far as like how we regard things or how we think of things. That the first level here is the modes themselves, the modes of a being's existence. And the mode is, again, that which is in something else conceived through something else. That's the affections of the substance. That thing, then, that the affections of that substance, those affections, the second level, those affections designate that which happens to the mode. Because again, as he says, the affections of human body is idea of present, external bodies as present as us, we should call things. And the affections are therefore images or corporeal traces. First of all, their ideas involve both nature of the affected body and that of the affecting external body. Oh, look, the water is eroding the mountain. I don't know, some shit like that. This is the second level. The third level, these image affections or ideas form a state of the affected body and mind, which implies more or less perfection than, oh, this is good or bad. And this is the way that the effect, this continual duration or variation is perfected is the affects. This is how we get to affects, is basically these three steps. We start with the core substance and affections, which are the modes themselves. We see them interact sort of from our position. We imagine these things. To go back to like logic of sense, really, when we make statements like the tree is greening, for example, it is getting greener. We're comparing states. Alice grows larger. We necessarily have the sort of bodies of Alice that we're sort of creating as we do this, because in duration is where the growing happens. The growing is the affects. We're saying something is happening to something. We're doing that. So this is like those three steps sort of restated here.
Also, in the ethics, does he use the word? Does Spinoza use the word duration, or is that something that Deleuze is using in his interpretation or understanding of Spinoza?
I mean, he uses the word duration. I don't think he uses it in the way Deleuze is using it here, which is clearly the Bergsonian meaning of duration.
Yeah, so I think just to try and get a handle on this, so the level one, I think it talks purely about the affections as the modes themselves, and the modes as the affections of substance or its attributes. So again, we go back to this kind of fundamental, like I say, the substance is also, we can think as essence, so it's a fundamental thing we are. So the substance as the affections are the modes of selves, but the modes are the affections of substance. So the modes, the affections of substance or its attributes. So I think again, this is kind of thinking about the way we are, and we are with others, with other substances, perhaps. So then the second level, the affections designate, so we're still talking about affections, they designate what happens to the mode, the modification of the mode, the effects of other modes on it. I think the second level talks about this kind of modification when modes kind of interact or act upon, I would say, the other modes. And he said these affections, therefore, images or corporeal traces, first of all. So the images or corporeal traces. So the traces, so they're images. So we could say this again. I think the body and mind think they're both present at all times, and I don't think at this state there's any one. We can't prioritize one over the other. Although
they're modes. It's a great line. Someone and body and mind aren't really, they're more or less different. It's modes. The way that Deleuze defines it elsewhere is the body is a mode of extension, the mind a mode of thinking. And so these are, again, it's not separating the substance. The substance is ultimately the same, obviously, but that they are the mode of blank, the mode of extension, the mode of thinking. So there's a parallelism there because of that.
Yeah, so they're not, there's not one that has priority over the other, but they're both, so both the body and the mind are kind of brought along at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. So, and so we have this notion of images or corporeal traces. And just to remember that we start from this notion of we don't know what the body can do. This is what Spinoza says. I mean, the idea is that we're kind of ruled by consciousness, and in a, what we kind of learn from the body in a sense, you know, so that we know we can go from the kind of rule of consciousness, so kind of conscious thinking, to the unconscious, the body and the unconscious being linked together. I think that would seem to be the primary direction that Deleuze indicates that Spinoza wants to follow. And in the second level, so the affections are either therefore images or corporal traces, and they're ideas. And I think both ideas that are both ideas of body and ideas of mind, I would say. There's not just one idea. And ideas involve both the nature of the affected body and that of the affecting external body. The effect, and then, so that quote, the affections of the human body, whose ideas present external bodies as present others, we should call image of things. And when the mind regards bodies in this way, we should say that it imagines. So,
I actually,
anyway,
just real quick, I actually don't read body here as body and mind, as like that kind of thing, but more like bodies as in bodies, as in states of things. So it's because the way that affections designate what happens to the mode, these affections are therefore images or corporeal traces. First of all, their ideas involve both the nature of the affected body and that of the affecting external body, because affections are thing sort of through another thing, the interaction of two bodies, one as the centerpiece sort of the thing, and then one of the doing the sort of decomposing or composing. And so it's less body and mind. It could literally be body and mind. You could actually have one through the other. And so that's how I read that he's talking about body here. No?
I'm not sure, because I mean, he does talk explicitly, he does separate the two, because the point is, I think, is that the affections of the human, because I think like we you know, as it's been said earlier, was that we don't know what, you know, it's to learn, we're learning from the body, what we're learning, it's connecting through what the body does, connecting us to the unconscious. I think that's the key kind of relationship that's being explored with here. And that's within this, I would say that's within this this final quote of level 2, the affections of the human body, whose ideas present external bodies as present in us. So we should call images of things. So these ideas are images of things. So rather they're not. So they're things, you know. And when the mind regards bodies in this way, so again, when thought regards, literally looks at bodies in this way, we shall say that it imagines. So there is a kind of imaginary process going on here. And if we remember the abstraction entry, the kind of imaginary is an abstraction. So it kind of it takes us out. You know, it's a kind of an imaginary. It's not a kind of. It's a kind of I think the idea that the phrase that Spinoza uses is we have inadequate ideas. So the imaginary are inadequate ideas. They're not. I think that the kind of essential the point of the inadequate ideas is that we don't know the cause. We know the effect, but we don't know the cause. And these are inadequate. Although he doesn't say it here, but I think the point, the relation, the point of this entry is affections and affects, the difference between them. So the affections are basically the kind of the interaction between bodies. One body acts or composes or decomposes another body, and then the resulting effects. The effects are the kind of sadness and the passions of sadness and joy that result from that, and how that's formed.
It's the duration that is the experience of the affects, the continual duration. The sadness, happiness, things like that are the sort of duration experience of that change or that affect.
Yeah. So then, and level 3. Yeah. So I think so in level 3, these image affections. So they're image affections. So again, I think what they are, I would say they're inadequate ideas. I would say at this point, they're image affections or ideas form a certain state of the affected body and mind. So it's a state of the affected body and mind, which implies more or less perfection than the preceding state. So it's got this notion of movement from one state to another within it. So it implies more or less. So either it goes towards the state of joy, or it goes toward, or it kind of goes towards a state of sadness. So that's a more or less perfection. Therefore, from one state to another, from one image or idea to another, there are transitions, passages are experienced, durations through which you pass to a greater. So it's this kind of movement. It's kind of this notion of movement that's being set up at this third level.
No,
Furthermore,
absolutely. Sorry.
Furthermore,
Go
these
ahead.
states, these affections, images or ideas are not separable from that. So that attach them to the preceding state makes them tend toward the next state. So I think there is a connection being made. It's not like, I think the point of the duration, I think at this point, anyway, is that they're not, as you said, they're not separable from the duration. Attach them to the preceding state makes them tend toward. So, and he calls it a continual duration, or variations of perfection are called, and these are the effects. So the effects have this kind of length, kind of this continual, enduring kind of variation that are connected, they're not separated. And these continual durations are called effects or feelings. So I think it'd be useful to try and sum up this paragraph, because so we start with
These three
the
paragraphs.
Yeah, 3 small paragraphs. But the sort of levels at the level, trying to understand the levels that are being talked about here. So I think we start from a kind of a level of kind of with a level of substance, so with a level of being itself, shall we say, and then we look at how these different beings in their modes kind of interact, the effects of one mode on another, and which is the basically formation of ideas, and which are ideas of body and ideas of mind. They're not like, for me it's a very new idea, that. So it's the idea of body and idea of mind. So the external bodies, so the affections of the human body present external bodies present in us.
Well, and just to throw a wrench into it, Derek, just because I like doing that. Deleuze here references Ethics 2:16. The Ethics 2:16 reads out pretty cleanly. I mean, it's not wild, but I'm just going to read the 2 corollaries. Hence, it follows that first, that the human mind perceives the nature of the variety of bodies together with the nature of its own. It follows, secondly, that the ideas which we have of external bodies indicate rather the constitution of our own body than the nature of external bodies. Because that is ultimately the play that Spinoza is making here, and it's, I think, what Deleuze is getting at in these 3 bits, that the affections and affects sort of are less, how to put it, I don't know. I'm the judgment or the decision or the looking at let's just say all the bodies around me, the stuff that's happening, it's less about those things doing that to me, or that they have some sort of innate being that is doing a thing, but instead it is the way that the mind, as he says, second level affections designate what happens to the mode, modifications, effects of other modes on it. And specifically, the affections of the human body whose ideas present external bodies as present in us, we shall call images of things. This part is, there's a double play that Spinoza's making that is, and it's really kind of wild in that one sentence, because it's not us saying, oh, those are separate bodies over there. Here's my body. I'm regarding all of these bodies. And I'm like as separate things, but instead, as he says, the ideas which we have of external bodies indicate rather the constitution of our own body than the nature of those external bodies. So it's a sort of a big shift saying the mind looks out over things, is sort of designating or looking at bodies, but it's looking at its own as well. And it's sort of creating the good, bad, or the build to perfection or not of that thing, sort of its own. The state, the durée, the whatever it is. And so there's a little bit more happening here than just saying, oh, it's looking at bodies. It's specifically looking at bodies and then judging its own against it. I feel like there's a Nietzsche moment of, I recognize health through sickness, sickness through health. I recognize myself, my body through all the bodies around me, thing happening here. Not to make it more difficult, but that does feel right, given that this is the one he's citing.
But is he saying that that kind of externalization of body is a function of the imagination, right? That's what the imagination is doing.
I think so. Yeah, this is
right.
It's the
It's merely an
ideas.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the point is though that I think what's happening in this section and this paragraph, these three small paragraphs, though, is that if we go to the previous entry on abstraction, he says that abstraction. Well, he said abstraction presupposes fiction, since it consists in explaining things by means of images.
Yep.
So I think when we're dealing with images, we're dealing with, he talks about ideas, but I think these are what Spinoza would call inadequate ideas. So we know the effect. So the effect of this interaction of the modes, the interaction of the modes, give rise to effects, but we don't know. We know the effect, and the effects are the effects. The affects are the effects of the interaction of bodies, but we only know the effect. We don't know the cause. I think that's the point. And so this is the notion of being the imaginary. When the mind regards body in this way, we shall say that it imagines. So I think this follows on fortuitously from the previous one a little bit. So I think what's being laid out here is not the final word. It's a kind of I should say the way we are when we're we're not able to understand how things are acting upon, the kind of results of the feeling of sadness, for example. We don't understand where that's coming from. We just know the effect, the feeling itself, the effect. And I suspect the rest of this section is taken up on going in the other direction, I think.
Yeah, I think the rest of the later paragraph will flesh this out and make a distinction between the affection and the affect.
Yeah, agreed. Shall we continue then? Because I'm going to say yes. It has been remarked that as a general rule, the affection, affectio, is said directly of the body. Well, the affect refers to the mind, but the real difference does not reside there. It is between the body's affection and idea, which involves the nature of the external body, and the affect, which involves an increase or decrease of the power of acting for the body and the mind alike. The affectio refers to a state of the affected body and implies the presence of the affecting body, whereas the affectus refers to the passage from one state to another, taking into account the correlative variation of the affecting bodies. Hence, there's a difference in nature between the image affections or ideas and the feeling affects, although the feeling affects may be presented as a particular type of idea or affections. Quote, by affect I understand affections of the body by which the body's power of acting is increased or diminished, aided or restrained. These are just a bunch of quotes. An affect that is called a passion of the mind is a confused idea by which the mind affirms of its body or of some part of it a greater or lesser force of existing than before, end quote. That was 2 quotes, because it's tough in audio to say that. It is certain that the affect implies an image or idea and follows from the latter as from its cause. But it is not confined to the image or idea. It is of another nature, being purely transitive and not indicative or representative, since it is experienced in a lived duration that involves the difference between 2 states. This is why Spinoza shows that the affect is not a comparison of ideas, and thereby rejects any intellectualist interpretation. Quote, when I say a greater or lesser force of existing than before, I do not understand that the mind compares its body's present constitution with a past constitution, but that the idea which constitutes the form of the affect affirms of the body something which really involves more or less of reality than before.
Yes. So
This feels like he's
continuing.
responding. He's responding to something because it opens with "it has been remarked," and so there's this entire paragraph feels like it's a response to someone else's interpretation of Spinoza or another version of affect theory, which I've seen some of this take place in. So there's a little bit of a response to something in all of this, I think.
Well, I think that this section, this entry is on affections, affects,
Mhm.
and they are separate. And in the previous paragraph, the 3 levels go from affections to affect, but I think it goes via images. So ideas, which are images, basically. And then he says, it has been remarked that as a general rule, the affectio is said directly of the body. So this is the affection is the kind of the bodies kind of interacting, one acting on the other. So he said the general rule of the affection said directly of the body, while the affect refers to the mind. He said, but the real difference does not reside there.
Because it's easy to sort of essentialize the previous bit we read, where the affections, you go, oh, so the affections are bodily. It's the like bodily experience, and then that gets turned into images, which the mind conceives. Like I'm saying that Deleuze isn't doing that, but I'm saying it wouldn't be hard to sort of misinterpret that. And so, and it's like the affection is directly of the body, while the affect refers to the mind, and it would be easy. And I'm sure I know people have said that. So, just trying to expand on that. Go for it, Derek. Sorry.
Yeah. So the real difference doesn't reside there. It is between the body's affection and idea, which involves the nature of the external body, and the affect, which involves an increase or decrease of the power of acting for the body and the mind alike. So in that sentence, so we have the external body and the way it does the way it affects us, in that it involves an increase or decrease of the power of acting, but not only for the body but for the mind as well. So it's not again, it's not this separating them out and saying, oh, there's body and there's mind. the body, the other body, the body that interacts with ours, or acts upon us, or composes or decomposes us, has an effect on both mind and body. So just to go back, it's between the bodies of affection and idea. So the affection is the body, the interaction of bodies, and the idea, the resulting ideas, which involves the nature of the external body, and the effect, which involves an increase or decrease of the power of acting for the body and the mind alike. So both are kind of affected by this. The affectio, which is the affection, refers to a state of the affected body and implies the presence of the affecting body. So this is the external body, the thing that's external to us, that becomes part of us. So the example, that earlier example, was the apple that Adam eats. That becomes the external body that becomes part and affects it in some way.
That composes or decomposes.
Yeah. Whereas the affectus, which is the affect, refers to the passage from one state to another. So we're getting, I think, clear definitions of the affection and affect. So the affectio, which is affection, is the state of the affected body and implies the presence of an effect of the affecting body. So the affection implies the state. Remember this notion of state. So it's a kind of transition. It's a transitional from one state to another. So the affection refers to the state of the affected body, implies the presence of the affecting body.
And it's both at once. It's the combination. The effect. It's the state of the affected and the affecting, both bodies.
Right, and it implies the presence of the affecting body. So that is the affection. So like I said, this section is on affection. So we've got a kind of a working definition of affection.
Well, it goes back to the.
If I just continue, let me just otherwise I'll lose the train of thought.
Yeah.
And I won't be able
We'll let you go. I'll come back to JK. Promise. Go for it, Derek.
The affection refers to a state of the affected body and implies the presence of the affecting body, whereas the affectus, this is the effect, refers to the passage from one state to another, taking into account the correlative variation of the affecting bodies. So there is a variation of the affecting bodies that are within the body are also undergo a variation, and they said there is a difference in nature between. Whereas the effect refers to the passage from one state to another, taking into account the correlative variation of the affected body.
JK, go for it.
Yeah, so basically he's going back to to number one, right, where he's saying that the affections are the modes, and the modes are the mind and the body, and in this case he's talking about the affection as a body. It's not the difference. The effect is not the difference between mind and body, but it's the difference between the mode and the affect, which is God, which is the primary substance, right? And that's the affect. Which is
I don't think he's not doing that.
Yeah,
so
that's
if we go if we go to the beginning.
Really quick, Derek, let him finish.
If you're talking about the increase or decrease of power, that's exactly what he's talking about. That if you identify affect as with the power of God, then it is the effect that is determines both the mind and the body, right?
So I'll let Derek go real quick because I know he's dying to respond. Please go, and then I'll jump in.
You go, Brooks.
All right. So I'm going to say sort of no. Like a lot of it's going to depend, JK, on what you mean by words you used. So it's going to be there's going to be a little bit of play in there. But when we're talking about, like, let's take the sentence Adam ate the apple, which made him die. Adam was poisoned by an apple, something like that. We have kind of the steps. We have, at first, we have the modes of being themselves. We have the modes of being are the nature of the bodies that I have implied through how I've stated sort of, or how I've sort of conceived of this. And again, there's lots of steps to this, but when I talk about Adam's body being poisoned by the apple, I've created the way that he phrases it. I want to make sure I get the exact lines here. Sorry, 2 seconds. Apologies. The state of the affected body, Adam being poisoned, implies the presence of the affecting body, Adam poisoned by the apple. And the affection that sort of is at the thing there is Adam is poisoned. The decomposition of Adam's body that has taken place through duration. Because again, Adam isn't like, if you were to just, Adam eats the apple, like in that moment he takes a bite, he might be becoming poisoned. But if I were to just take a snapshot, Adam's cool. Like Adam's cool, he's fine. But he's being poisoned because he's eating. The duration sort of comes out there. Now the substance underneath all of this, the substance, the bodies at some level, yes, there is God, but affections themselves, like as we're talking about them, they aren't acting on God. It's one of the very, very specific things for Spinoza. Spinoza's God is the infinite substance that can't be broken apart, and as such is always one adequate cause, but also has no ability to be acted upon. So there's no way for an affection to sort of take part on God. Again, it's not some dude with a beard. This is like the end-all be-all Spinozan God. So it's a little bit different. That's kind of how I would answer. I don't know if that makes sense. JK.
Yeah, basically, it's the if the affection is the body and is the original mode, that is the affection of God, right? That is the affection of the
There
affect.
isn't really an original mode though, because the nature of modes as they are, and it's just to sort of go back to that quote I had that
Right.
I was playing with. The body is a mode of extension, the mind a mode of thinking. When we sort of are going through and discussing like the mode or the thing, there isn't really one like
Exactly.
mode that is the core thing. Like Brooks's mind, Brooks's body isn't like a core a priori mode. God really isn't even, I'd be hesitant to say mode, but God is the substance. God is that thing and that infinite thing.
Right. But he's talking about the real difference between the what is the real difference between affect and affection, right? Between the mind and it's not between the mind and body, but it's between the mode of body and mind and the effect of the substance, right? And that I think that's what he's saying that's the difference. Like the affect is determines both the mind and the body. It's not that I think that the real difference is what he's trying to make here, that pointing out.
Okay. Derek, you got something?
Yeah. So yes. So just to recap, so we're dealing with affectio and affectus, or affections and affects. So affectio is the affections. So just to recap, so the affections or affectio refers to a state of the affected body, implies the presence of the affecting body. So the state of the affected body and implies the presence of the affected body, whereas the affectors, the affect, refers to the passage from one state to another. So it's a kind of, this passage. It's this passage. It's transitive. It's the effect is transitive. It's subject to change, and it takes into account the correlative variation. So the affecting body is similarly subject to change as well. The correlative variation of the affecting body. And he says there is a difference in nature between the image, and he expands the affections to the affections are now image affections. And he says there's a difference in nature between the image affections or ideas. So these ideas are image affections, and the feeling affects, although the feeling affects may be presented particularly as ideas or affections. So which is what he said in that first paragraph. And then that quote, by effect, so again, we're looking at effect. By effect, I understand affections of the body by which the body's power of acting is increased or diminished or aided or restrained, which is again something we've said. He said, which is a repetition almost of what has just been said earlier. Then next quote: an effect that is called a passion of the mind is a confused idea. This is what we were saying earlier. It's an idea, but these feeling effects are confused ideas by which the mind affirms of its body or of some part of it a greater or lesser force of existing than before. So it kind of understands that the mind understands the body has undergone a change. So it's a greater or lesser force of existing than before. So it understands its transitive nature because of the actions of another body, but it doesn't understand why this has happened. So it's a confused idea. And then it is certain that the effect applies an image or idea and follows from that as from its cause. Implies an image or idea and follows from the latter as from its cause. But it's not confined to the image or idea. So again, these images or ideas are confused. They're like we have an image of something, but we don't have the effect of something as an image, but we don't know its cause. But it's not confined to the image or cause. It is of another nature, being purely transitive and not indicative or representative. So it's not a sign. It doesn't indicate something. It's not representative. It's not a kind of an image in that sense. So the image is a representative thing. We're talking about effect. I think in this case, since it experienced in a lived duration that involves a difference between two states. So this is the kind of the key point, is that this transitive nature of the effect, it involves a lived duration that involves a difference between two states. So there's the notion of going from one state to another. This is the effect. So the effect, which in a sense is the kind of the result of the affection, one could say. This is why Spinoza shows that the effect is not a comparison of ideas. So it's not a comparison between one image and another image, and therefore rejects any intellectualist interpretation. When I say a greater or lesser force of existing than before, I don't understand that the mind compares its body's present constitution with the past constitution, but that the idea which constitutes a form of the effect affirms the body something which really involves more or less reality than before. So there is an affirmation of change that happens. I think that's the point. This relation between affirmation, the bodies, and the resulting effect is becoming, I think, clearer. I think hopefully clearer.
Would you say that the degree of affect, increase or decrease of power, depends on the mind's understanding of its cause?
I don't think so.
Well,
So
right. In other words, you said by effect, I understand affections of the body by which the body's power of acting is increased or diminished, aided or restrained. So, in other words, the more one understands the cause, right? The more one is able to identify with the substantial activity, right, of the attributes and so forth, and the nature of its ultimate substance, then it understands more of its cause, and therefore its power to exist or increases. The power of acting increases, right? And
yeah, no,
right.
I think the point, though, I think that gives a role to the mind as being it's like consciousness. This is exactly what Spinoza wants to get away from. So we're not conscious. It's not a conscious understanding. That's the point. Do you remember?
Right.
So we had that previously about the kind of doing away of the body allows the unconscious to
I
a
didn't.
kind
I
of
didn't say. I didn't say unconscious or conscious, but I mean,
yeah, but you said
you
understand.
also
You
talked
said
about
understand, and I think
right, right, right.
understanding is exactly conscious thinking.
But he's talking
Understanding.
about. But he's talking about image, imagination, right? Image, affections, or ideas.
Yeah, but those are
Is that
confused. Do you
consciousness?
remember those are confused ideas?
Okay, yeah.
I,
And so
I,
if
I,
so,
I
in other
wait,
words, if
wait, wait, wait. I
yeah.
are those so I'm the are those the confused ideas? I'm because to me the affect is.
No. I think the ideas, images. That's what they are. As he says, where are they? Affect is called a passion, and mind is a confused idea.
Yeah, the affect.
The mind affirms of its body as some part of it, a greater or lesser force existing before. I mean, it's an image that is it. We know the effect, we know the effect, but we don't know its cause. I think that's the point.
But if the affect could be a confused idea, or it could be, or could it be a unconfused idea, right? One uh, that is identified with the attributes, right?
So if we just go to that final quote from Spinoza, so I mean, he said Spinoza shows that the effect is not a comparison of ideas, and therefore rejects any intellectualist. So I think, JK, you're giving an intellectualist interpretation. So it's through thought or through thinking that we understand. So this is exactly what it isn't. And so he says, the quote is, when I say a greater or lesser force of existing than before, I do not understand that the mind compares its present. This is what I mean. This is what I'm saying about this understanding that you seem to be saying. I don't understand the mind compares its body's present constitution with a past constitution, but the idea which constitutes the form of the effect affirms of the body something which really involves more or less reality than more or less of reality than before. And this is a passage. This is that kind of transitive passage from one state to another, the kind of more or less of reality than before.
Yeah. Well, go back to the original question he's posing. What is the real difference between the affections, the body's affection, and the affect? And he says the affect involves an increase or decrease of power of acting for the body and the mind. So, what is necessary for the body to increase its acting, power acting, or to decrease its power of acting? What is, how do you, determine or um, understand what that means? Is it, is he saying that it is purely based on due to imagination that is as a cause of these confused ideas of the mind or confused passions of the mind, or is it you know right? So what is he saying there? What is the affect there?
Sorry, I don't get it. Don't get what sorry, I don't understand your question.
The question is we'll go back to the original question he's posing. Is he said that what is the real difference between? It's not the difference between the mind and the body. The real difference is between the body's affections and idea and the power of acting, right, for the body and the mind alike, which is he calls the affect. Just go back to the original in this paragraph. Go back to the original point he's trying to make, because yeah, there's a lot of a lot of lingo in between here that. So I'm just trying to understand what he means by that. What
So,
the
well,
difference, the real difference is between not between the mind and the body.
it's
That
written funny in the English version. That sentence, specifically that sentence, we'll just go with it is between the body's affection and idea. It's written funny in the English version because it seems like he then goes on for 3 more paragraphs when he's breaking apart. But I think I see what you're saying, JK. Please tell me, by the way, if I'm generally in the right spot. But that to restate a little bit, the difference is not between the body and the mind, where the body gives us affection and the mind affect as it intellectualizes, but instead it's between the body's affection and idea. And idea involves the nature of the external body, the affect, which involves an increase or decrease of the power of acting for the body and mind alike. There's like this other huge process that's sort of setting up. So it's the way that the affections, the modes themselves sort of exist. These modes are active. The affections designate what happens to the mode and modifications to it and the effect of other modes on it. These are the images that were given, and then these image affections or ideas form states of the affected body and mind. This process, to just to go at like Spinoza's ethics, the way he talks about adequate or inadequate ideas, here he's discussing affect, like the resultant affect. I have a feeling that this, or oh, I look at this and I get the feeling that this, blah blah blah. Like however we intellectualize it, the affective process, which is what he's discussing here, is the inadequate idea versus the active modes of thinking. And so there's to me, as I've read Spinoza and as I'm kind of seeing this, and JK, tell me if this is what you're saying, because I kind of get this, that we're talking about sort of not necessarily body being intellectualized into mind as we sort of bring in our embodied experience and we express it outwards, but instead that the affections of body, which are sort of the parts is decomposed, recomposed, whatever, just the affections of the body. And then the idea being this larger complex thing and the difference between these two.
Right. So he's talking about an affect that could be that could go in two directions, right? Either as an adequate idea or as an inadequate idea, right? And so the part that that is confused, the passions that are confused are inadequate, right? And so
I don't think it's worth going to inadequate or adequate ideas because he's not really like we're not there yet. We're going to be getting to ideas, trust me, at some point, and that's going to be its own discussion. But right now, I think in this, he's just literally talking about, and I want to try to keep it in the definition because it's
right. Okay, so let's talk about the affect as that which increases or decreases one's power to act, right? So
I'm not.
So which one? Yeah. Yeah. So which part of the affect is one that increases our power to act, and which part is that is not that decreases one's power to act? So
sad passions, confidence, like it's confidence or insecurity, kind of.
right. And also, Derek mentioned abstract ideas or images. Are images abstract? I think he refers to them as abstract, right? And so they would decrease
Yes.
the power to act. Okay. So
I think we need to keep them both affection and affect in mind, but not see them as somehow in opposition or somehow in a conflict or something. It's not dealing with a dialectic here. There is a relationship between the two. I think this is what this is trying to talk about, is the relation. So, and within this relation, we have bodies and we have minds. And so the affections are the kind of the way in which when the bodies kind of interact, or one acts on the other, and the resulting effect is the effect. I think that's what we need to think. I don't think we should be seen as one is antagonistic towards another.
No, I agree.
But if you go back to one, if you go back to number one and in the affections, right? He does make that distinction between affection and right in the very first line. He says the affections are the modes themselves. The modes are the affections of substance or of its attributes, right? And the affections are necessary active since they are explained by the nature of God as an adequate cause, right? And so God is
that's just affection. There's no mention of affect in that at all.
Well, I guess you could read into that and say that the affect would be God as the adequate cause, and affections are the modes, right? He does say that here. Affections are modes. So would God be the affect then? Is the adequate cause?
We may get to that. There's a little bit more here in this paragraph, but I think that's like it feels like, and I don't think I've ever said this in a Deleuze reading, that feels more existential than I think Deleuze is trying to go for here. I don't know if I've ever been able to say that. But
Can we go to the next paragraph?
just real quick, because I think one of the last things we should definitely move on. There's some specific words Deleuze uses here that are in the French a little bit more, and then kind of lost in this also. Just it's worth mentioning because we kind of passed over it, but it's these affections are necessarily active. There's a conversation happening sort of in the text about active versus passive. This is one of Spinoza's big things, is sort of the active sort of part of our minds, the other part of our minds that is more passive. The affections are these active things that are the attributes of bodies. These things sort of collide. We see them. We sort of ascribe because they are sort of evental and they're sort of transitory as things. We ascribe them sort of this abstract existence, and we see them as such. But the challenge is that these affections or ideas form these states, and so we end up in this weird place. The image affections or ideas form a certain state of the affected body and mind, which implies more or less perfection than the preceding state, which gives that sort of, again, idea of something giving or taking more power, these sort of elements. But this is passive. This last bit is passive. So when he's talking through in this paragraph, it is not confined to the image or idea. It is of another nature, being purely transitive, not indicative or representative, since it experienced in a lived duration that involves the difference between two states. This is why Spinoza shows the affect is not a comparison of ideas, and thereby rejects an intellectualist interpretation. This is him sort of making that last point that, like, again, this is very much sort of, a anti, I think, therefore I am kind of thing, or the idea that, I have two different thoughts and I'm considering them, and that's where, that's a deeply active process, and Spinoza's really wanting us to consider both the active and the passive parts.
Right. But this heading, as you notice it says affections, comma, affects, right?
Yes.
So he doesn't use affects in the explanation, but it's already
He does.
stated yeah. But because he's saying that affections are necessarily active, so it's active because it's a product of affects, which is God or as the adequate cause.
Affections are active.
Right.
Since they're explained by the nature of God as adequate cause, yes.
Exactly, right. But in the later, he will later make a distinction between the affection and affect, and it sounds like affections would be passive.
Well, and we're about to get there because he's
Can I just, sorry,
Go ahead, Derek.
can I just, the thing about the passive and active, just to, the passive, it's when it's the effect of the affections, then they kind of interact. And the passive is when we have a decrease in what the term of perfection. So which is the kind of, so the effect of something like the sad passions. So it decreases our capacity to act. So we go towards a passive, whereas the opposite is we have an increase and we go towards the joyful passions, and which increases our capacity to act. And again, this is one area this is significant for is in like politics or in theology, whereas because what Spinoza says is that the tyrant uses these in order to kind of make the people or the individuals that he rules over passive. I think that's the point of the passive and active dichotomy.
Yeah, I agree with you. That yeah,
the,
but there's a political dimension to his discussion.
I mean, we're not quite there yet, but there is for sure. I mean, that is sort of earlier. It's not really in this paragraph, but uh, Derek is spot on. The idea of the active or passive is the ability for one to be acted upon, like the power one has, sort of. I don't want to say self-determination, but the ability one has generally to act one's will or do one's will. The way Spinoza talks about it, the mind is in some cases active. It's literally the opening of Ethics 3. Mind is sometimes active, other times passive. Adequate ideas are necessarily active, inadequate ideas are passive. So this is the beginning of the idea of resentment. It's the beginning of the idea of the depressive peasant, or there's a bunch of different ways that this is talked about, but it's the idea that with adequate ideas, you're more able to act upon the world and sort of express your will, with the affect being sort of the thing that drives you. It's necessarily confusing. It's necessarily not the whole picture. It's not really an adequate idea in God. Instead, it's this sort of secondary thing that this is the thing that sort of creates a passive mind that's able to be acted upon and manipulated. Sort of. Derek, is that fair?
Yeah, no, it sounds good. Yeah.
Okay. That's kind of to sort of square that circle. That is where he's coming from. And so to continue, I do want to continue because we're about to get to literally that, I think. We have like 2 paragraphs left in this, and we need to finish this we're going to do 1 word this week. I'm not going to do a word over 2 weeks. So we're going to do the next paragraph, and I'm going to push us hard through this. An existing mode is defined by a certain capacity for being affected. When it encounters another mode, sorry, 1 second, I'm reading the wrong stupid one. Okay, to say again. An existing mode is defined by a certain capacity for being affected. When it encounters another mode, it can happen that this other mode is good for it. That is, enters into composition with it, or on the contrary, decomposes it and is bad for it. In the first case, the existing mode passes to a greater perfection. In the second case, to a lesser perfection. Accordingly, it will be said that its power of acting or force of existing increases or diminishes, since the power of the other mode is added to it, or, on the contrary, is withdrawn from it, immobilizing and restraining it. The passage to a greater perfection or the increase of the power of acting is called an affect or feeling of joy. The passage to a lesser perfection or the diminution of the power of acting is called sadness. Thus, the power of acting varies according to external causes for the same capacity for being affected. The feeling affect, joy or sadness, follows from the image, affection, or idea that it presupposes, the idea of the body that agrees with ours or does not agree. When the affect comes back upon the idea from which it follows, the joy becomes love, the sadness, hatred. In this way, the different series of affections and affects continually fulfill, but under variable conditions, the capacity for being affected. This is literally what I just said. This is literally what I just said. This is the nature of one being able to express one's will or not, and having that decreased, increased because of our interaction with bodies. I go out in the world, I meet somebody, or I eat something, or I breathe something, or whatever it may be. My capacity to act or my capacity to express sort of myself into the world is increased or decreased. Yay, happy, joy, or sad. And the good things make us happy. The bad things piss us off and end up becoming resentment, which becomes hatred and rebellion.
Right, but it's based on an idea, right? And that idea is not intellectual, is it?
It's based upon an idea. It's based upon the idea like the image affection, as he says, it's because again, I'm hesitant to say it's based on an idea because, as he said, it's not so much this intellectualization of the process, but it is the idea that it presupposes that this thing was good or bad for me, or the conditioning of that. Yes, I would say yes,
Right. Okay.
because it follows from the image affection, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Which is different from intellectualization of a comparison or anything like that. But yeah, so yeah.
Yeah, I think can we go to the next paragraph, because
Yeah.
I think this
Oh, please,
this
yes.
notion of ideas still implies a confused idea. It still implies confused idea. These notions of images. So he said the feeling, effect, joy or sadness follows from the image, affection, or idea that it presupposes. And so I'm interested to find out, that how that notion of the idea or the image is developed, because I've just looked at it. It seems to be developed, but I'm not sure how.
It's going to be a fun discussion. So yes, let me finish this and then we will chat. So long as our feelings or affects spring from the external encounter with other modes of existence, they are explained by the nature of the affecting body and by the necessarily inadequate idea of that body, a confused image involved in our state. Such affects are passions, since we are not their adequate cause. Even the affects based on joy, which are defined by an increase in the power of acting, are passions. Joy is still a passion, insofar as a man's power of acting is not increased to the point where he conceives himself and his actions adequately. Even though our power of acting has increased materially, we will remain passive, separated from our power, so long as we are not formally in control of it. That is why, from the standpoint of the affects, the basic distinction between two sorts of passions, sad passions and joyful passions, prepares for a very different distinction between passions and actions. An idea of affectio always gives rise to affects, but if the idea is adequate instead of being a confused image, if it directly expresses the essence of the affecting body, instead of involving it indirectly in our state, if it is the idea of an internal affectio, or of a self-affection that evinces the internal agreement of our essence, other essences in the essence of God, a third kind of knowledge, then the affects that arise from it are themselves actions. Not only must these affects or feelings be joys or loves, they must be quite special joys and loves, since they are no longer defined by an increase of our perfection or power of acting, but by the full formal possession of that power or perfection. The word blessedness should be reserved for these active joys. They appear to conquer and extend themselves within duration, like the passive joys, but in fact, they are eternal and no longer explained by duration. They no longer imply transition and passages, but express themselves and one another in an eternal mode, together with the adequate ideas from which they issue.
This is this is the key, I think, because as long as we as long as the affects are given by ideas, they will always be inadequate. They won't be able to kind of go beyond that adequate idea, those inadequate ideas. And I think he gives it.
Is that it?
Yeah, well, because I think what's happening is move from passions to actions. Because anyway, this is something he's already touched upon actually, but let's just go through it. So long as our feelings or effects spring from the external encounter with other modes of existence, they're explained by the nature of the affecting body and by the necessarily inadequate idea of that body, a confused image involved in our state. So as long as our feelings or effects spring from external encounter with other modes of existence, they are explained by the nature of the affecting body and by the necessarily inadequate. So we have an inadequate idea of that body, a confused image which is involved in our state. And these effects, so we still have effects, but these effects, what he's doing now is he's splitting the effect into two states, shall we? I don't know what the right word is, but that's into two types. So these are passions, and so such effects are passions, since we are not their adequate cause. And so again, it's still the cause is not ourselves. They still comes from outside, but it's from an external body, which we have an inadequate knowledge of, and inadequate idea of that body. So even the effects, it's even the effects based on joy, which are defined by an increase of the power of acting, are passions. So these are we can have effects based on ideas which will always be inadequate, because ideas are images of things and not the things themselves. They're just images of things. And so even joy, which is a kind of valorized state of the passion, but even that, even the effects based on joy, which are defined by an increase of the power of acting, are passions. Joy is still a passion, insofar as a man's power of acting is not increased to the point where he conceives himself in his actions adequately. So this is the key, is that we must be able to understand, increase to the point where he conceives himself, ourselves, and our actions adequately. So obviously the word adequately is opposite of inadequately. So even though our passion of power of acting has increased materially, we will remain passive. So the point is to become active, separated from our power, so long as we are not formally in control of it. That is why, from the standpoint of the effects, the basic distinction between two sorts of passion, sad passion and joyful passion, prepare for a very different distinction between passions and actions. So the effects is between the passions and actions. An idea of affectio gives rise to effects. An idea always gives rise to effects. An idea of affectio always gives rise to effects. But if the idea is adequate instead of being so an idea gives rise to effect, but it's whether the idea is adequate or inadequate. But if the idea is adequate instead of being a confused image, if it directly expresses the essence of the affecting body, instead of involving indirect in our state. So if we kind of access to the essence of the affecting body, if it is the idea of an internal affection or of a self-affection that evinces the internal agreement of our essence. So in a sense, it seems what he's saying here with this connection between the essence of one and the essence of the other, and from that this is how God comes into the picture, and the essence of God, a third kind of knowledge, and the effects that arise from it are themselves actions. So these effects are actions. So we're truly in control of our actions, whereas before we might have joy, but it always comes from an external body, a confused body. Not only must these affects or feelings be joys or loves, they must be quite special joys and love, since they are no longer defined by an increase of our perfection or power of acting, but by the full form possession of that power or perfection. So we have this full formal possession of that power of perfection. And he uses the word blessedness should be reserved for these active joys are a form of blessedness. They appear to conquer and extend themselves within duration, that like the passive joys, but in fact they're eternal. So that their duration is they don't have a duration. They're eternal. They're never ending and no longer explained by duration. No longer imply transition passages press themselves on one another in an eternal mode. And this is the kind of relation to God, together with the adequate ideas from which they issue.
Yeah. So the idea must arise from within the self, right? Within the affectio, and the self-affection that evinces so really the essence, right? Essence of God is what he's talking about. The idea that's based on the essence of God, as opposed to the external modes, which is the cause of the confused passions, right?
That's how I read it.
No, I don't think so, because I think what he's saying is that we need to have we need to have the essence of one body, and it's like connection between our essence and the essence of another body. And he calls God a third kind of knowledge. So it's not. I think the key is, again, if we give the power to God, then we're completely undermining Spinoza's basically anti-theological argument. So we can't give the power to God. We can't say God is the cause of this. It's a third kind of knowledge. I think that's and what that is. So God is like infinite or the eternal, the idea of God. It's an idea of God, yeah. It's the eternal, and that's the point. It the eternal replaces duration.
Really? So you're just reading you're saying the opposite of what he's saying about the essence of this third kind of knowledge?
I'm gonna wait, Derek, because I'm reading it not far off from what JK is saying. Like I probably have quibbles here and there, but I don't have much to add. Normally I'd dive in, but I'm actually curious.
In what way? Sorry, I don't understand.
Well, so how I'm reading this, just to sort of state it slightly differently, and JK, tell me if I'm off here or anyone else, please type away. The affections of things. The affections are the sort of modes of existence itself. It's the affections of substance or its attributes. These things sort of hit like something hits me. The bodies interact. My body, another body. My understanding of this other thing, how I see this other body and myself, my understanding of this interaction conditions the image, and the image affections form certain states, which cause me to believe I'm going from, perfection to non-perfection, like some sort of delta of existence is happening within duration there. And though that delta creates the affect. Confused, shitty sort of version of this is if I have a crap understanding of things. And if my crap understanding comes from if I'm looking at the external body and putting cause within that thing. The apple poisoned Adam, and the cause sort of being there, the cause being within this thing. This would be confused. This would be the inadequate idea, the lacking direction, because ultimately, if I don't have an understanding of sort of the way things are working, if it doesn't come from within sort of the nature of me, I'm trying to say this, it's without, like, I'm trying to say this within the language of what's said in this definition, which is not fun. So I'm probably misstating a couple things, but like, we aren't quite at the point. I guess another way to put it, he hasn't in here talked about like any of these specifically being the inadequate or adequate ideas overall. Like this process only produces inadequate ideas. There's no adequate ideas, not possible. Instead, it's the confused or the mistake made is through these things being the inadequate ideas, which creates confused, decreases your power. Confused sort of affect generation, which decreases your power. But Deleuze had talked about before, and I think he's implying, and I think what JK is saying here is he's reading it too, that the process can also generate joy. It can also doesn't have to necessarily be always diminishing. That this process can lead to greater perfection, the increase of the power of acting. This affect would be joy. The same setup here can lead both ways. So it can be it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to always be with inadequate ideas, I guess would be. It doesn't always have to be an adequate idea, I think would be how I'd put it.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's right, because I think it said it must be an adequate idea. I mean, it might be an adequate idea of something that doesn't agree with us, or it could be an adequate idea that something does agree with us. But I think the idea is that we must have an adequate idea. And this is
Right,
this is a
but
point. I mean,
where does that take place? Like where, like that would be
well,
still in the second
it takes
level.
place, well, as he says, it takes place. It talks about the kind of the agreement between essences. So what something actually is, this comes back to the notion of substance. It's what something is. It's like we know what it is, and we know ourselves as well, I would say. But he talks about the where does he say it? He talks about a formal understanding. So the I'm sorry, I can't find it now. Well, let's just go back. Even though our power of acting, so he distinguishes between passions and actions. So we can be, then the tyrant might want to subject us to kind of sad passions, but equally the tyrant might want to subject us to joyful passions, just to control us.
Well, but just to
Whereas-
control us, that would mean that it's still an inadequate idea. Inadequate ideas produce,
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
but
Exactly, that's what I mean. It's an idea. It's an inadequate idea.
yes, but if you have an adequate idea of the process, and if you're aware of it, even if it's decomposing, you're still able to act. Your power of acting is still increased.
No, I think the point is not the process; it's the body. We understand the essence. Again, it's as you said, it is the idea of an internal affection or of a self-affection that evinces the internal agreement of our essence, other essences, and the essence of God. So we have three. We have an understanding of three kind of essences in our essence, the other essence, i.e., bodies, and the essence of God as this kind of eternal, as eternal, the infinite. And from this kind of knowledge, from this understanding, from this self-affection, he calls it, an internal affection. This is from this rise, and the effects that arise from it are themselves actions. So these effects are actions. Not only must these, and he calls them quite special joys and loves, no longer defined by an increase of our power, of our performance or power of acting, but by the full formal possession of that power. So we have that. It's a formal possession of that. It's a thing as it is prior or before or after, before it's actually employed, shall we say. We just possess that. We have a possession of that. And from that comes this state of what he calls blessedness. We're in full. We possess this state of blessedness. We have a full possession of that power or perfection. It's not something given to us. It's not something that's given to us in terms and through a passion, and as the effects as a form of passion, which either increase or decrease our activity, our action, our capacity to act. We actually possess that in ourselves, and then so these three things they appear to conquer and extend themselves within duration, like the passive joys, but they in fact they are eternal and are no longer explained by duration. They no longer imply transition passages, but express themselves in one another in an eternal mode, together with the adequate ideas from which they issue.
I didn't follow you. Sorry. That's okay. We don't have to every time. I didn't really follow that one. Maybe Jane Claire, JK, anyone. I got kind of lost on that one. Sorry.
Yeah, I think
Well,
that's a lot of intellectual jargon, but I don't follow either. It's not how it's. It seems pretty clear that Deleuze is giving a pretty good interpretation of the Spinoza, um, but I don't know.
yeah, so if I just repeat, but he says, right, So I think the basic point is that when the affects are kind of subject to ideas, they're always going to be confused. They're always, because so so the affects that result from affection, so the kind of interaction of bodies, which are guided by ideas. The ideas are always confused because we only have what he calls a confused image. So we only have an inadequate idea of the body that kind of is interacting with ourselves. So the point is to kind of get to adequate ideas. But he said, but if the idea is adequate, instead of being a confused image, if it it expresses the essence. So this is the point. The adequate idea is never an image. It must of something. It must express the essence of the affecting body, not the image of the affecting body, but its essence.
Yeah, but if the affect comes from that external encounter with other modes of existence, which would be that affecting body, they're explained by the nature of the affecting body, which is necessarily inadequate of that body. Like it's just
no, because it's an image. It's an image. That's the point. This is what I mean. At the bottom of page 50, if the idea is adequate, instead of being a confused image, if it directly expresses the essence of the affecting body, instead of involving it indirectly in our state. So this confused image, it involves the body indirectly. We don't. As a confused image. It's just an image. It's a representation. It's an image, a fiction we form of that body. Whereas if we have access, if it's an adequate idea, what he means by adequate is that it gives us that expresses the essence of the affecting body. So, and that's the key point. It's the difference between an image and the essence of the thing. The image is an image of the thing. It doesn't, in a sense, it's like, it's kind of looking at it and kind of trying to, making an image or a fiction of it. That's another term that he uses in that abstraction in the previous section. But now he said it's the adequate idea expresses the essence of the affecting body, and it doesn't. So, in which the result it doesn't involve. Instead of involving it indirectly in our state, it is the idea of the internal affection. So it's something internal to ourselves. It's not indirect. It's internal. And it gives a self-affection that evinces the eternal agreement of our essence, other essences, and the essence of God. So these three kinds of understandings, or three kinds of knowledge. And then from that, he said the effects then are not passions, but they're actions. And he calls them, not only must these effects or feelings be joys or love, they must be quite special joys and love, since they're no longer defined. But so it's all that is kind of got rid of, that. So they're no longer defined by an increase of our perfection or power of acting, but by the full formal possession of that power. So we are in full possession of that formal, of that perfection itself. We don't go towards a perfection. So, or it's not an increase or a decrease. We are in full possession of that. And the state, he says, resulting is results in a state of blessedness. So before there was a state goes from one, a higher or lower, goes from sadness to joy, say, from different states. But now I know he doesn't use the word state, but I would say the word blessedness should be for these active joys. They appear to conquer and extend themselves. So they conquer themselves. These are active joys. Within duration, like the passive joys, but in fact they're eternal. So it's not that from duration it goes to an internal, and no longer explained by duration. They no longer imply transitions and passages, but express themselves on one another in an eternal mode. So this is the mode of God, the kind of infinite, together with. So this is the point we reach. It's not God given us this. This is we reach that mode through this kind of through the possession of adequate ideas.
So how do you define adequate ideas, Right? Are they not part of the essence of God?
But obviously adequate is the opposite of inadequate ideas, and the inadequate ideas are images, whereas
Right.
adequate ideas are, we have access to the essence of the thing. It's not an image, it's the essence, it's what it actually is.
Right. Right. Okay, but it's still an idea, though, right?
Yeah, but it's adequate.
Yeah, you're right. So he's talking about two kinds of ideas. One is adequate and one is inadequate. The inadequate is based on the in relation with modes, external modes those are the inadequate ideas, right? Based on the external modes.
Based on ideas,
Yeah, based on ideas, based on
inadequate ideas.
derived from the external modes of interaction.
Based on the
Whereas the adequate
externality of it.
ideas are
It's
based on
the apple poisoned Adam, the idea of the poison apple, or the whatever it may be, like that would be the inadequate idea. It's the apple being poisonous is not like it's the essence. This is the image we have of it. Instead, the adequate idea would be to come around to. I mean, it's what Spinoza called the notion of commonality. The way that instead of sort of placing the image or the creation of the affect in specifically the mode external, but instead realize the commonality of things, and through that find the disagreement between things which causes the decomposition. This common notion, as Deleuze, or as it's being translated here, the notion of the common that exists. This would be the good kind of thing. This would be the adequate idea. This would be that which just sort of gives us this special joy, as he talks about it here, because it's not placing it in the extension specifically and allowing the external to define the process to us, but instead our understanding of sort of all of these things, and then being able to see the commonality, strip that away, find where we find the differences and oppositions forming.
Yeah, I mean, so if you wanted to extend this notion of adequate and inadequate ideas, so Adam's inadequate idea of the apple would be that it represents evil, or that's the kind of theology of the apple.
Or that it is evil.
Whereas the adequate idea is that it's poisonous and it will decompose the body. I think that I think the importance of this is, again, it's this practical philosophy. It's like, how should we live our lives, you know? And what Spinoza wants to do is to kind of direct us away from being controlled. So our emotions being controlled for the sake of either, say, religion or political control. And it's only if we attain this state of, I keep calling it a state, I don't know if it is, but a state of blessedness, that we are fully in control of our own actions. I think that is the point.
We are fully in control of our own actions? Or, I'm sorry, I may have missed how you stated that. Say it one more time.
Well, the point is, like I said, the way I would see this is that Spinoza's is practical philosophy, and the question is, how should we live our lives? That's the way I would say, encapsulating that notion of practical philosophy. And so one of the things he wants to do is to kind of free us from the control of forces that want to control us. So the government, say, political control and theological control. So this is where the morality comes in. Obviously, the kind of the control of morality, and place that with the control with ethics, which is our own, comes from ourselves. And so this in this entry leads us, the affections and affects leads us, finishes on this state of blessedness when we are in control of our own actions. We are active. We are actively in control. I think that is the point.
Yeah, but when you say we is what? We is identified with what? With the your social group or your external world, or is when you say we, what is that? Is that identified with
I mean, one. Let's say one then. One.
what is the one then? The one is the
It
one.
would definitely be one rather than, but it's just another way of saying one.
One? One is how do you define one? The number one or the as opposed to two?
Yeah. It's like the royal, well, one is, one.
Yeah, I don't understand.
I don't mean the no, when you say one, I don't know.
I
What's
don't
to do with
either.
this? You're referring to yourself, yourself.
And with that, I think I'm going to bring today to a close. We're going to end there. And we'll make our way through next week. We'll move a little bit on finally, and we'll get to, I think, attributes and then causes. With any luck, maybe we'll even get 2 words next week. But I want to say thank all of you for joining. We rabbit holed hilariously a few times. I love doing it. And we will reconnect next week. Thank you all next week.